SYS presents Adventures in Online Education.
Hello, online educators. You're listening to SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. I'm your host, Natalie Conway. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the podcast, first off, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Now, you're going to want to head over to aoepodcast.org and enter your info at the bottom of the page to start receiving the AOE newsletter. It's a little piece of positivity for your inbox. And returning listeners, you know I appreciate you so much. If you like AOE, you're going to love our new daily podcast, This Day in Education. Learn about important people, events, and inventions that have shaped education in the U.S. and beyond. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or at thisdayined.org. Okay, back to today's awesomeness. I have the pleasure of speaking with Rachael George, Director of Student Services and Elementary Programs at the Oregon Trails School District. She is a practicing educational leader, author, speaker, adjunct professor, and advocate for education. She currently serves as the NAESP State Representative for Oregon, is an NAESP Fellow, and is the COSA President Elect. Rachael is an all-around girl boss. She has a new book coming out this winter as well called She Leads, The Woman's Guide to a Career in Educational Leadership. Today, we talk about being a woman in leadership in a school, COVID, online learning, and of course, you'll learn about a teacher who helped change Rachael's life. So, are you ready? Let's learn something new. Rachael George, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and being my guest. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Super excited.
It has been a tumultuous last couple of years in education, to say the least. I am curious what a win is that maybe you've had recently with students or staff. Is there anything that is going right?
Well, I appreciate that question, right? Because it's super easy to get fixated on the negative and to laundry list all of the stuff that isn't working that we're frustrated with or maybe find challenging. So the win for the moment is that it's made me become, as a leader, really crystal clear about what's important. So some of the things that used to be a part of my practice as a leader, as an educator, now's not the time. And I've had to really, really skinny it up, which is fascinating because I would say that our district and where I work has a skinny mantra that we like to not add initiatives upon initiatives. And we don't really change up our game plan because it works. But this has made us even more focused than what we've been in the past, focused on student learning, student growth, and really helping them grow with whatever they're working on. So really trying to take some of that noise, which is a ton going on right now, wherever you're at in the nation, and just block that out and really do the hard, great work.
That's awesome. And I am sure your staff really appreciates that perspective and that prioritization, because it always feels like there's so many directions we're being pulled in as educators. And so to let some of those go and say, okay, focus on this one thing. That's really awesome.
Completely.
You recently co-authored a book entitled She Leads, The Woman's Guide to a Career in Educational Leadership. I cannot wait to read this. Tell us about, one, why you wrote the book and what unique challenges and opportunities you see women experiencing and maybe you experienced yourself in the field of educational leadership.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're in the final stages of editing. They're like making it into the really pretty pages right now. And
Yay!
So I know it's really exciting. So it should be hitting Amazon and everything in the next month or so. So Maya Elise Tolan, who I co-authored it with, we're just really, really stoked. It actually features a handful of educational leaders, from classroom leaders all the way to the superintendent level, from around the nation, from a variety of backgrounds. And it's just fantastic stories. And it all centers around how to navigate that whole leadership journey, jungle gym. Because let's be honest, like there's a ton of women educators that are teachers, but as you go higher up, the percentages don't maintain the same level. They really, truly don't. And it just gets smaller and smaller. And so really trying to help women navigate that pipeline, be able to develop and identify those skills, because we lead really differently. And we also have some different things that make us unique. And so sometimes we hold back a little bit. And, it's interesting. I came into education as a second career. I worked in fire for the Forest Service for 11 years, fighting fire. And it was a very male dominated profession. And my mom and I talk about this in the book. Like, I didn't want to go into teaching. I thought she was totally trying to trap me, go into this female dominated area, you'll love it. And I'm like, no, because I pictured applique and jumpers and the denim and all of the holiday decor. you know what I'm talking about, right? And I'm like,
I do.
I'm like, Mom, that's not me. I can't do it. And she talked me into really understanding that there were still a lot of men in education, and she thought that the transition would actually be pretty smooth. And it's fascinating. It was smooth for me, but also very eye-opening. So over the course of teaching 8 years, I started in a residential private school in the middle of the woods because I could wear Carhartts and not wear makeup. And it was a nice move.
It's awesome.
Right? From being in the woods. Fantastic. But when I finished my first license for my principalship and entered into it, I looked around and realized I had changed a ton in 8 years, but the workforce hadn't changed. And then I looked around the room with my first principalship, and I was one of 2 women secondary administrators sitting at the table. And I had just never ever worked for a female principal, female superintendent. I'd always watched them in the teacher ranks. And so then as I moved up, I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. We function completely different. And then my mom was also an elementary principal. And that was fascinating hearing her perspective and how she viewed educational leadership and how she navigated those turns and twists. And then really partnering that with, what have people done that have found success, that has truly worked, where they've been really able to find their niche and just dive into their passion areas and still lead. So we wanted to highlight a lot of that work. My favorite part is 2 of them. One is the perfectionist trap. We talk about perfectionism and how many of us are self-proclaimed perfectionists, and we work at things. I was just having a conversation with another female leader recently about an ODE report, and they wanted to do lots of time and lots of essays and lots of explanations. And I was like, girl, just get it in, cut it in half, give them a skinny answer, and they'll send back feedback about the areas you need to fix. So you can cut down half of that time that you're spending on it. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Right.
I mean, because what we find in women and I'm sure men do it too, right? But a lot of other women that I've talked with, especially around the OD report we were talking about, they've spent hours, 40 some hours working on this. And then they get completely frustrated when it comes back and it has feedback and tweaks that they need to change. So trying to really get over that and just trying to just get the work done, work smart, work intentionally, and realize you don't need to work to perfection. And then the second piece that I love is that we need to get over ourselves and just apply for the job. We truly do. It's interesting.
Yes.
Right?
Dare to lead,
It
right?
is.
Brene Brown.
It
Yes.
completely is. So it's fascinating. There's some research that talks about when men look at the job description and all the qualifications, if they hit 75% of it, they're like, I'm applying. Sometimes it's even on the low end. They're like, that job sounds fun. I can probably do it. I know I haven't done a bunch of stuff, but what the heck? I'm going to put my application in. Fascinating. Women, on the other hand, we go through it item by item and they're like, oh, I've only seen this done, but I didn't do it myself. So I don't know about this. And that one, I have not done a budget at that level. Nope. So we talk ourselves out of actually applying for the job. Mm-hmm. And when we don't apply, right, we can't even engage within the process. We don't even give ourselves a chance to really come to fruition and lead the way that we're meant and able to. So just those 2 pieces really stand out to me.
Yeah. And it makes me think as well about mentors. And so if there are fewer women at the top, then there are fewer women to mentor those of us in the ranks below too. And so you don't have that person maybe tapping you or pushing you to be like, go for yeah, it's fine. Go for it. Who cares if you haven't done a budget at that level? Just put your application in. You're great. You need those mentors as well. I'd imagine that kind of help push you along.
You're completely spot on. And then the interesting piece is, due to the lack of women, a lot of our mentors end up being men. And then I mean, that's fantastic. And there's a whole science behind and research around them sponsoring you and you helping get into those circles by their mentorship, by them pulling you along and them almost like vouching for how legit you are. But on the flip side, that also creates a system where sometimes we're pressured or we're created and trained to lead like the systems that came before us. And
yes.
So we have a lot of stories about women really trying to reconcile what their authentic leadership style is because they're the first female high school principal in that entire building from when they were originally created. And they've been mentored and brought up by men. The past leaders have been men. The rest of the district leadership are all men. So how do you do you, but yet still keep that movement going forward with that past history?
That's a fascinating conundrum or barrier to think about, that we really have to accept who we are as leaders and our personalities, and also be willing to grow too, right? To not just be static and this is how I do it or this is how I want to, but still be open to learning new things, but also try not to be just another reincarnation of what's been done before, because you are unique and different and should be offering your new gifts and talents to the organization. So awesome. Wow. I cannot wait to read this book when it comes out this winter and to really dive more deeply into that and into what we can be doing as female leaders to support one another too. I want to switch gears a little bit. Many of my listeners are online educators and online administrators. And as we continue to navigate all the consequences of COVID-19, which affect everyone, no matter where they are or how they're learning, I'm curious what you have learned about online education and leading through that change to and from online learning. Do your priorities change now? Are you centering certain different pedagogical approaches or ways of doing things now than you did before 2020?
$1 million question. So I think what comes to mind at first is just a huge, huge thank you. Thank you to all the online educators and leaders that are out there. Holy moly, your job is hard. Like I had no idea, because you've been like a mysterious fog, like in Oregon and just throughout the nation of like, I know we have online teachers out there. We have online leaders, but like, what do you do? And then COVID-19 has actually been a really huge blessing because we've been able to walk in your shoes. And I would even add to that walk in your shoes without any training and try to figure out things that you've already mastered. And so I hope that for folks that have not worked in an online setting, like I had not until COVID-19, that folks reached out and connected with their online colleagues. And I am really, really thankful that we have a gal that works in our district that I'm good friends with that has been instrumental in the Oregon online programs and the charter schools, and was able to give our district a lot of tidbits of like expertise and suggestions on like, oh no, we've already been there, done that. You might want to try something different. Like that helped so much with our leadership learning curve when it came to online education. Like talk about having a resident expert. So thank you, online educators, because wow, I understand a little bit, but I hope that we've developed stronger relationships through this. You know, you guys have so much information and experience and knowledge that it really, really goes untapped. And I think that that's one of the pieces I would love to see moving forward, is that that's shared at a statewide level. I would love to see some conferences and breakout sessions as we go to like the COSA Principal Conference or our statewide one in June for our umbrella association, that we're highlighting these best practices, that we can really merge these two together, that they're not in isolation. And it's not a really skinny Venn diagram, but they're really two of the same. You know, our why is the same, right? Like we're here to help support family students and grow them academically and support them whatever option that family picks, because the family knows best about what's good for them. And we need to work together. I think this has really put a magnifying glass on that. When we're opposed to each other, when we compete against each other, like people don't win, and it shouldn't be about winning. It should be about kids.
Yeah. And I appreciate everything you're saying so much, because it was fascinating, you know, and obviously everyone just wants to help. And so when COVID first hit in 2020 and people were reaching out, I'm sure a lot of teachers, online educators were in the same position I was, where your friends are calling you from across the country, like, what is this? And how do I have a worksheet? I have to make it a PDF, all these things. You're just like, okay. And I think one of the things I've learned transitioning to online ed a few years ago and being in it now for a while is just less is more. A lot of the time we're trying to fill, especially if you're doing remote learning or it's a temporary kind of online learning situation, you're trying to fill 6 to 8 hours of a kid's day. And that's not the goal of education. One of the byproducts of the fact that we have brick and mortar buildings where we send kids is that we get, let's be honest, like daycare for a big chunk of the day. And there's a place for social and emotional growth and practice with social skills. And, you get fed and there's all these things that happen that take a ton of time and they're fine. They're neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. But when you transition online, you lose so much of that and you no longer necessarily have to fill this 6 or 8 hour day. And so it's just such a different job as an educator, and it's just such a different experience as a student too. So I am in total agreement. I think the more we can work together, share ideas, cross-pollinate what's happening, because those of us in the online world can still learn from our counterparts who are teaching in brick and mortar classrooms and vice versa. So I love that idea of just sharing information and being that open access.
No, definitely. Breakout sessions. We got some work to do. We've got some planning together, don't we?
Absolutely. Yes, I would love that. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about advice for online learning. SYS is an online management company that takes a different approach. We partner with schools to manage solutions. Whether you are a district adding an online option for students or an online school looking to go in a new direction, SYS Education can help make it exactly what you need it to be, with high-quality products at a fraction of the cost that schools pay to other companies. We are not just an educational consulting company, we are online educators ourselves, and a tech team like no other. Let us help you bring your online school experience to the next level. Find out more at syseducation.org or by emailing info@syseducation.org. Set up your free consultation meeting to discuss how SYS might be able to help your school. All right. Before the break, we talked a little bit about COVID, because how can I not in these years of COVID? But I'm curious, Rachael, what is your advice to schools regarding online learning, regarding that whole new idea, basically, to districts, whether it's kids being away because of quarantine or families who have decided they want to stay online? How do you see schools and districts as a whole filling that need in the coming months or years?
Man, I don't think we're there yet. I think online schools are like doing a lot better right now. I'll speak for me personally. I thought COVID was going away this summer. Were you there too? Yeah.
It was nice being outside without a mask and just living life.
It totally was. And, restrictions were lifting. I can't tell you the number of presentations I was in where I said, as we're coming out of COVID. And yeah. So what that did was, like, my planning and my brain was not wrapped around still doing online well, which is, I think, a complete party foul, because we learned all these great tips and strategies and tools. And then I was just going to put it by the wayside. Like, how bad of a practice is that? And so a couple weeks before school started, right, we're like, oh no, Delta's kicking up. We need to have some other options for families. Mm-hmm. And that was a bummer. There was a bummer for me and my emotional feelings towards it, because it was a sense of mourning, a sense of sadness that no, we're still in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
Right. We're not coming out on the other end. So I had to rewrap my brain around online learning still. And I think that that's a piece that, instead of imagining it for, again, two separate circles, this is what we had to do then, and now we're going to go back. It really needs to be interwoven throughout all of our practices if you're in a brick and mortar. And then for the online piece, whether you're in quarantine, whether your family chooses that that's not a brick and mortar is not the right spot for your kid and you're going to online. I think regardless of what setting you're in, it all comes down to relationships. And
yes,
right?
I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's rethinking how we're connecting and making the relationships and fostering those connections. From a brick and mortar standpoint, it was the struggle bus, getting comfortable using our cell phones, getting used to using Google Hangout or Zoom to have conferences one-on-one with students or to meet and connect with families. From the online perspective, it's challenging and you have to really be intentional, right? How are you reaching out to the new families that join? How are you setting up those transition pieces? Because I imagine you have a lot of kids that are coming in new that they're like, peace out. I'm not going with my normal neighborhood school. I'm going with you. And then you're like, awesome. And let's train you, and help get you accustomed because the practices are a little different. They might be expecting a 6 to 8 hour day of curriculum. And you're like, oh, no. Let's look at this. You have some more autonomy over your schedule. And here's how you're going to go about it. And to be able to have those conversations, to be able to really help grow and track kids and support them where they're academically or socially, emotionally, where they're at, you have to know the kid, which means that you have to be engaging with your dialogue with them while you're teaching. The feedback can't be one-sided. It needs to be reciprocal on both ends about the material and the activities you have planned, along with how students are performing. So, I mean, it's a feedback circle, but it all comes back to relationships. It's just right there in the middle of it.
It is. The relationships are always at the center, and you feel that brick and mortar or online, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have a good relationship with a family or with students, then good things happen. And when you struggle to make that connection, learning is harder. The whole process is a lot harder. I'm curious, based on what your research from your book and listening to other leaders, is there anything about the female leadership style or communication style that lends itself to online? Are there any hidden bonuses of being a girl boss in an online setting?
Well, typically we like to talk. So I think that helps. By nature, we're connectors. And so we visit and communicate. And some of the amazing stories that are within She Leads from women building leaders were stories of where they struggled. They struggled being online. They struggled not having that face-to-face connection. And they were really honest, transparent, and reflective with their families and their students about the struggles that they were personally going through, especially if they had kids that were doing online at home as well and trying to balance it. And so that was just incredibly powerful. And it's interesting because I've known some gals that have actually, after COVID-19, have decided to stay online. So they've gone to an online setting or they've taken over the online component within their school district just because they found, hey, this actually works a little bit better for my family and this works out better for childcare. And I applaud him, man. You really got to do what's best for you and your family, and to have options, which we all do, I think are just really fantastic. So that was pretty neat.
I think so too. Options for educators, options for our students. It all just, it makes sense to me.
Does.
Yeah, I think that's really cool.
Because one size doesn't fit all, right? And we go through different seasons of life where we might need something different, and that's okay. And we can take a pause from where we're at. And as long as we're making a decision, well, actually, even if you don't make a decision, that's a decision. But, lots of choices and options. We're never stuck.
Absolutely. Never stuck. I love that. Yeah, we really aren't. And I also appreciate what you said. And I appreciate your vulnerability with me about, I hoped COVID was gone and done. And so all those things we learned and did, I just put in the back burner because I didn't need them anymore. And then lo and behold, we need them again. But I really envision in the future that schools will always have that piece, that it would be like, even if you're gone for a day, or even if you are, going on vacation with your family for a week, that there's this online coexisting element of your school that you can tap into while you're gone and still be connected and still have access to Common Core standards and activities and all of that. And that it would sort of seem seamless as they come and go as needed. I think that would be really cool for kids and teachers. So who knows what the future holds? We're still crafting what that will look like. We just know it'll be different, and that's not a bad thing.
Agreed.
Well, Rachael, my last question for you is one I am asking all my guests this season. It's a way to end on a high note and hopefully a happy note, but also to celebrate those awesome teachers who helped shape us in positive ways. I am curious who your favorite teacher was growing up.
I have a handful. I'm going to share the one that probably changed the trajectory for me, though. Her name is Debbie Gillespie. She was my middle school, because it was like a junior, senior high school situation, art teacher. But I am not an artist.
Yay.
Yeah, like I draw stick figures. Like my sister is the one that rocks it with like pottery and all sorts of great things. But she was one that also was the student council advisor. And I hated high school.
Oh,
cool. Hated it. The dynamics were really challenging. I mean, I was really, really involved with a lot of different pieces, and I ended up being student body president my senior year, but my junior year, I was ready to leave, was ready to go, right? Was ready to go to the community college, ready to not finish high school and just finish it out there. Was ready to walk away just from high school drama stuff that wasn't healthy, didn't want to deal with. And she talked me into running for student body president. And then that was the hook. If I don't win, like I'm out. And it wasn't ever about that. It was staying connected and having support and mentorship and trying to help me find my little circle of where I could find and develop my skill set. And I did win. It was like not a really great election. Like there was lots of drama around that. And I still, went to school part-time. I went and did some school to work programs at the local court and really learned some on-site job skills. But she really helped me through that. I really struggled. I'm the person that liked middle school better than high school. Like who does that?
Sorry, what?
Yeah. So, I mean, she just really helped. She helped me stay in high school. She helped me finish instead of just tapping out and saying, I'm done with this. I can go to a community college and start college early. And that helped develop a lot of resiliency, a lot of leadership skills for me, working through challenging situations and conversations with people that I didn't want to have, and developing tolerance. Like it's not all fun and games or roses, in the workforce, working with people and having to work through that was really, really helpful. So not something I would have done.
Someone to help you. Right. That's amazing though, to go from I am out of here, I'm going to leave, and then to be student body president and to be staying and to have learned all of that conflict resolution or management and personal perseverance and just strength and guts. That's really cool. Thank you, Mrs. Gillespie.
Yeah.
Yay. That is awesome. Rachael, I'm so appreciative of your time today and all your great ideas. If listeners want to get in touch with you, if they want to find you or maybe follow you or get your book, how can they find you in the online
Yeah,
world?
you bet. So you can find me on Twitter. It's Dr. Rachael George. Rachel is Rachael, just a little different spelling. George is normal. So you can find me on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook under that same name. So looking forward to connecting.
Excellent. We'll have resources in the show notes to your website and to also a recent NAESP article that you co-authored about leadership and all good things. So really appreciate you today. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of SYS Presents Adventures in Online Education. Special thanks to my guest today, Rachael George. Today we learned the importance of staying true to ourselves as leaders and leading in our own unique ways. We challenged our thinking of brick and mortar and online schools being in opposition to one another, and instead started considering how to share sound practices for the benefit of all families and all students. If you liked what you heard today, please hit subscribe and give us a rating. On Twitter, you can follow me, Natalie Conway, at AOE Natalie, and the show at SYS Presents. If you're interested in finding out more about SYS education, head over to syseducation.org. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our exceptional team at SYS Education, including wonderful sound engineers Natalie Farrell and Matt Duran, and our producer, Bo Neal. Thanks for listening, and remember, we can learn new things.
listening.